Hey, what's up, branding experts? Arik here, and welcome to On Branding Podcast. And today, my guest is Jiri Boudal, and Jiri is the CEO and founder of Behavio, where he offers marketing metrics, ad testing, and brand tracking. Hello, Jiri. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, great to be here.
So, first off, can you explain how you are different from Kantor and Ipsos and companies like that?
We're easy to use, really, dashboards compared to the 100 slides, tags, or whatever project based. We're much more budget friendly and we're subconscious. That's important because 95% of our decisions are subconscious. So if you're asking people in the questionnaires what they think about their behavior, that's typically not how it is. You ask them if they, for example, if they buy healthy beverages, they say yes, I want them, and then you see their trolley full of whatever Coke and soda and things like that. So we're subconscious, we're implicit research and brand tracking. That's it. So it's more business.
Okay, so as marketing experts and branding experts, we know that is sometimes it's really hard to explain to our clients, the value of branding and marketing, right? And especially the return on investment. This is where brand tracking comes into play. Can you just talk to us about some of the benefits of tracking your brand, setting a benchmark against competitors and see where their strengths and weaknesses are and how we can outpace them? Can you just talk to us about some of the metrics that you track for your clients?
I'll start first with the brand marketing. Why is it needed? It definitely is not that needed, and you typically don't have the budget when you're starting brand. But soon you've grown up or scale up, you typically have a problem to grow on with performance marketing only because that's used for kind of harvesting existing demand for the people who are actively looking for a solution. But most of the people at every market, typically 95%, are out of the market at any given moment. And then when, let's say, half a year later, they want to buy the thing and they already know your competitor, they will choose them if they have built the brand. So that's why you need to build the brand. So that's why typically mid and larger companies invest a lot, typically more than they invest in the performance marketing, into the brand marketing. And so because you invest so much in it, you need to see that there's some change in the brains of the target audience, because that's where your brand is. Your brand is not a logo. Your brand is basically in the thousands or millions of brains of your target audience, like a memory of your brand. And it's causing the people to buy you when they have the need. So we're measuring that. That's what brand tracking does. It's measuring how big you are, in how many brains you are already in. Let's say if you were able to create the right structures, memories that will cause people to buy you. That's what brand tracking does. And so that you can see, for example, when you have a campaign for 3 months, a big brand campaign, and in a TV or radio, it can be just PR campaign. And you see if your metrics, that can be a little bit different, whether you are a smaller or mid or large company, but let's say it's brand awareness. So you see whether it has lifted and before it's visible in sales, because that's my problem with brand marketing. You have to wait until all those people are in market, which can take 6 months, it can take 12 months if it's buying cars. So with brand tracking, you know that you were able to stick with the people's minds before they're in the market to
That's
buy
well
your car.
said. I'm glad you said that your brand is not a logo, is not your visuals. These are identifiers, right? But your brand is actually how customers perceive your business, right? And I'm glad you also said that sometimes we do marketing, whether it is brand marketing, as you mentioned, PR campaigns and such. But customers, they're not always ready to buy right now. So sometimes they are just aware of your brand, right? You spend money on that to make them aware of your brand, and when the need comes for them to buy, they have some kind of a perception in their mind about your brand. So when they're ready, they can recall that, and that's what brand actually is. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I've read an article a couple of months ago. It was great. They call the brand building the brain engine optimization. Like you have the search engine optimization. So the brand marketing is the brain engine optimization. That's why it's so important, because when people already have the brand engine optimization, they don't need to do the search. Yeah, so once there is in a category, once there are strong brands, then the people won't invest their energy into searching something. That's why typically SEO is important for the new categories, But once they're mature, the categories, the brand is more important because you've already optimized for the brain and people search in their minds and not
Yeah,
in
that's an
the people.
interesting concept, by the way. I have not heard that. So, as you mentioned, there are different metrics that we can measure, right? Let's maybe take me as an example, right? I have digital products, right? I sell courses on branding and graphic design and templates and such. So I'm a branding consultant, right? So I offer
Mhm.
services to my clients, but I also sell products to other creatives, right? Now, what are the things that we can measure in terms of brand tracking?
So, yeah, basically, you have three big groups of things you measure in brand tracking. One is your market. So, actually, what's the percentage of the total population involved in your category? The people who have the need. That's great to know because that's great for example, for investors. How big is your target market or whatever? Or you already know what percentage of your target market, which is the next group, already know you. So there was a market. How many people are there? In terms of percentage or even the numbers. And then the second big group is your brand. Mainly the awareness for smaller brands, definitely establishing the recognition so that you would know that, let's say, 10% of the total addressable market already have heard about you. And when they see your logo or your face, they can recognize you. That is like a first step because without that, we can say that if people can choose in between the brand they have already seen, they know, and the new one, they'll choose the brand they already seen because there's more trust in that and they kind of have the feeling that it's more trustable. So the first step is this, let's say, aided awareness. It's aided because you show something to the people like your face or your logo and ask them, do you know it? And then for, let's say, a little bit larger companies, mid companies, and larger brands, you can go on with this and make this more subconscious. Because the holy grail in this is the so-called brand salience, which is basically when I ask you, okay, so if you want to listen to the podcast on branding, what brand do you think of? And if they think of your podcast, then you've won because in 95% of cases, the people will actually listen to the podcast they've subconsciously thought of. So we have the starter tier where the main metric is the awareness. And then we have the pro tier for larger brands where they also have the awareness, but you have this salience, this spontaneous thinking of the brand that is more advanced and it's more correlating with the sales because that's how our brains actually works. So that's the second set of metrics. You can have additional metrics to branding like brand emotion. Here is complicated because people typically think that they want to build a love brand. That is not the truth. You have to be thought of, you have to have stick in your mind, but you don't have to be love brand to people to love you. So you can check, for example, the negative emotions and their reasons and perhaps understand some barriers like people can have with you. So, but there can be like, I bought it and I didn't like the product, whatever
Yeah.
it was. It was awful. I didn't like the taste of it. Or so there can be some interesting things for your product or marketing. And then larger brands or mid brands also have some brand associations because typically they want to be connected with some specific attributes like we in our case would be whether people really see us as easy to use and budget friendly, and also some occasions where people buy you. So let's say there can be different occasions where people would be listening to you. Some of them could be like, I want to learn about design, let's say, and that could be, you could be strong at the design but you can be much weaker as a brand in, let's say, branding in general. So that's again important. So that's the second part, the branding metrics. And the third part is basically the second part, but for your competitors. So every metric you can have for yourself, you can have like an intel and you can see your competitors. So that's why often brands want to see their brand tracking because they can understand how they are strong or weak compared to your competitors. So it helps to guide their messaging. And also you can see if there's someone growing fast and you can see it immediately and not later when it can be too late already. So it's like your personal intelligence agency on how people are satisfied or not satisfied with their competitors. You can see their weaknesses. You can know if someone is really growing fast or declining, and that's
Right.
good to know.
So, just to sum up for our listeners, there are a few metrics that we can measure depending on whether it's a small brand or a bigger brand. But basically, it starts with a total market size. How big is your total market? Is it, for example, 10 million people, right? And then how
Mhm.
many of those people are people already recognizing your brand, right? So let's say, as you mentioned, you gave
Mhm.
us example of 10%. In my industry, let's say there are 10 million creatives, and 10% of them recognize me because they saw my face on YouTube or on podcast, or they saw my logo somewhere on the internet by searching in Google, for example. So these are the metrics. And then we can go deeper. As you mentioned, there are concepts like brand silence, brand emotion. We can
Mhm.
measure positive, negative emotions associated with the brand, and also other associations in regards to positioning, right? So when they think about your brand, what do they think about? Is it easy to use? Is it great because of the design? You like the design. Is it cheap? Is it expensive? Like, you can position your brand differently, right? And then you can also use all of these metrics against your competitors, right? Let's say you're not the leading brand in your industry and you want to become the leading brand. You can just check them and track their performance and see what's their weaknesses and what's their strength, and then come up with a strategy to kind of outpace them, right?
Yes, there are customers who use this like to really acquire investments because it's an asset. The brand you've built in the brains of your target audience is already a financial asset. So you can tell, hey, we have the big market we've already known. So that's one thing which it is used for. The other is really knowing whether your campaigns are working. If it does something, because if it works, you can still use the same strategy. If it doesn't work, you have to change it. Then we have the ad testing, which in case it doesn't work, you can make it much better. You see the details, but the brand tracking is the overall whether your strategy works. And then it's also good to set the objectives. Often the objectives in branding can be based on the brand tracking. So let's say in the next year, we want to grow by 10 points in the awareness. Yeah, you can kind of estimate how much would it cost and what to do for that. So often brands use it as their objectives and as an KPI, and you see whether you've been successful.
Right. So in general, when it comes to marketing, there are different types of marketing, but sometimes we can actually measure the return on investment on marketing, right? Like, let's say you run ads on Facebook, how many people click the link and how many of them sign up, right? But when it comes to brand building, it's really
Yeah.
hard to quantify those and sometimes justify the investment, like, let's say, in visuals, in branding and messaging in a website, because it's long-term investment. So that's where
Yes.
brand tracking comes into play, because you can measure all those metrics that are not so obvious as with advertising, but it's an asset, as you mentioned. Your brand is your asset. So as my last question, you have had many clients. When do they start thinking about tracking their brand performance? Is it because they want to raise money? Is it because they want to invest more in marketing, or they want to just revise their overall business strategy? What do you think is the main reason?
I think typically is they've started investing a lot in brand marketing. Some of them can have even the PR and they want to know who already knows them. So some of them started really early. But most of our clients, let's say they've been around for like e-commerce, they've been around for 2 years using performance marketing only. And some time ago, they started to do their first brand awareness campaigns or more PR or even TV campaigns or radio campaigns. It could be or out of home campaigns. And they just need to know whether it works. So that's the typical example. Then we have a lot of customers who are like, hey, we've grown into a couple of countries and we just with performance, but also performance marketing helps you establish the brand awareness. So they, for example, want to see, hey, where are we? We have the live sport, for example, which is the like online TV, very strong in the Asia, in the Southern America, in the Europe. And they want to see where they are the number one and when they're number three and whatever. And they kind of understand when they're already strong, when they need to invest more. So typically, I would say that most typically you start with when you're over 10 million a year investing in the marketing budget here, which is the pro version, let's say. But then we have a lot of really small, even personal brands. We have, for example, the English teachers in some European countries who are really great at creating content, and we measured them, and they're, in terms of awareness, they're stronger than many big brands. They're known by a third of the population, and so they know how many people know them. It's good for, let's say, getting sponsors.
Okay, so if you guys want to learn more, we're going to link to your website, which is Behavio untitled.labs.com, so you guys can learn more. And by the way, I love the website and the copy. It's really easy to understand what you guys do. So
Thank
we're
you.
gonna link to that. And then, are you active on social media?
Very much on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post like really useful tips. So it's Jiri Boudal, Boudal, and Behavio. You can also find it through the brand name. And I'm trying to, I'm kind of the nerd of the brand science and the marketing science and evidence-based marketing. But it's often reading through books that are hard to read, and marketers don't have time for that. So what I'm doing is I'm posting a lot of useful tips, like that are really short, but they tell you a lot about how to do your brand marketing effectively in terms of really making money. Because I think it's always great to be creative and to have a nice distinctive brand, but what counts in the end is whether it
Right.
creates money and the business value.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to link to your website and your LinkedIn for you guys who are listening to learn more and connect with Yuri. Thank you so much. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.